there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ajde, majkata!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The so-called, quote, balancer mechanism, unquote, is temporarily frozen by the Constitutional Court in Macedonia, meaning that people wanting to work in the public sector in Macedonia must apply and be hired based on, wait for it, merit and their talents and abilities rather than their ethnicity. What a novel idea. In the meantime, as Bulgarians stumble towards a, checks notes, sixth round of parliamentary elections since 2021, Macedonian Prime Minister Miko tells the Bulgarians in the EU that Macedonians can no longer accept ultimatums and that, at a minimum, Macedonia needs a stable government in Bulgaria to talk with. Yeah, good luck with a stable Bulgarian government. And the U.S. State Department shells out over $20,000 of U.S. taxpayer money to stage a play in Macedonia that, quote, portrays God as bisexual, sharply criticizes former President Ronald Reagan, and paints communists in a positive light, all in an effort to push gay rights on Southeastern Europeans, unquote, according to media reports. As famed U.S. baseball player Yogi Berra said, it's like deja vu all over again. We'll discuss all this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Chelemanov in Skopje, Macedonia.
Yes, and I am back here. It was great seeing you in Macedonia and getting to do our Independence Day podcast and check in with old friends and everything else. Always good to be back here, too. Sure. What's that?
And new friends, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. So, back in the saddle. That's the phrase I was looking for before we started recording. Back in the saddle and firing on cylinders. Yes, I am in the desert. I live in Arizona. Yes, back in the saddle. Although I rarely ride horses. So.
You have actually. Is it the thing?
Oh,
people
sure.
do there?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
There's literally, it's called horse property, maybe a few kilometers from me, where people have, a hectare, 2 hectares, a couple of acres, and they have horses on them, and they, ride them around and take them out. So, but we're not here to talk about, we're not here to talk about horses. We're here to talk about all things Macedonian. So, I don't know if we want to, let's start with the so-called balancer mechanism. So this is temporarily frozen by the Constitutional Court, but this is a case, I understand, that was brought before the Constitutional Court before the current government of Vomero won the elections in June. I think this was brought to the court's attention earlier this year, and this is something that arose out of the so-called Ohrid Framework Agreement, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
The positive discrimination, or how do you call it? The DPA.
It's older than that. It's called affirmative action in the United States. Now, affirmative action originally, and it's being dismantled here throughout the United States, and that's a good thing. It was originally,
But you're going to have an affirmative action president. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Actually, I'd say
hopefully not.
Going strong, stronger than ever.
Affirmative action was implemented, in my memory's a little rusty on this, as a way of addressing wrongs that the government, not the private sector, the government had made in terms of racial issues here, going way back, decades, scores of years. So, but it's all been addressed, and so it's being dismantled. And the problem with affirmative action is that it went from the public sector into the private sector, and universities and things like that, which are by and large, government funded, public funded, I should say. So, this is a conservative podcast. We're conservatives. Macedonia's a conservative country. People should be hired based on their merit and their ability, not on And the problem with this so-called balancer mechanism, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you've had Macedonians claiming to be Albanians, you've had Albanians claiming to be Macedonians, and plus all the other ethnicities that exist in Macedonia claiming this, that, and the other, to get those jobs in areas where it's mandated that you have to have a certain number of ethnic people in this position, in this job in the public sector. I mean, I don't want the air traffic controllers to be hired based on the fact that they're Roma or Albanian. I don't care what their ethnicity is, as long as they're competent in keeping the planes from crashing into each other. That's the main issue.
Yeah, and that was the big issue when the DUI started, went to beat up several of them because they were not, they were Albanians, but not the
right
proper
kind.
politically aligned Albanians.
Exactly.
Yeah, this was when we saw some resistance finally, on both in
Yeah.
the hiring of them as well as on that incident at the parliament at the dying days of the SDSM DUI government.
Right.
But in other areas, you know, people are just tolerating this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. Well, we'll see if this again, this is temporarily frozen. We'll see if that continues or not. You know, again, call me old-fashioned, but I think people should be hired based on merit, and ability, and talent. So.
No, it's much discredited, especially with the excesses of Artan Grubi, who was leading the ministry for hiring Albanians.
That was the name of the ministry.
Yes. Yeah, that one, for example, has 99% Albanians working in it, so no rules apply for this government institution. But okay, that's just one ministry, and then the rule means that in any public institution there should be a balance, even number of, proportionate hiring of Albanians to their ethnicity, and it's led to horrible abuses, like of incompetence, of people working, reported as working here, collecting a salary, but actually getting a no-show job, and they're living in Switzerland, Germany, making some proper money, just using the Macedonian government salary just for, just for minor expenses when they come to visit the country. And Vumera promised to do away with this, especially after the completely illegitimate census we had under SDSM and DUI, where they were counting the Albanian diaspora in massive numbers. The Macedonian diaspora boycotted by this point, completely disillusioned with the government. They said, we don't want to have anything to do with this sham. And then over 100,000 Macedonians in the country are estimated to have boycotted the process, both for COVID reasons, but mostly for reasons of national pride and boycotting the government. So now we have completely bogus numbers, and Albanians insist that these numbers should be used at, more than 33%, I think, should be their representation in the government institutions. So this is not a solution. It's a way to, if Vumera moves in parliament to put an end to this practice, then it's going to be a huge problem for their Albanian coalition partner at a time when both Vumera and Vlen, the coalition partner, are fighting DUI. This would give new life to DUI, so it would be a big tactical mistake. So they're going through the Constitutional Court. This is an indication that the Constitutional Court is talking to the government, and it's because they can decide when to put one or other issue to the docket. And so it's something that, the Albanian parties can say, okay, we know this is a fake, a bogus model, an unsuitable model. An outside power is intervening, the Constitutional Court. It's not us. It's not the Vumera doing this. It's not the parliament doing this. And then we promise, and Vumera is agreeing to this, to put a proper law on representation of ethnic minorities in the government institutions to vote sometime in the future, and it will probably fix, put more emphasis on the merits, and maybe even one of the principles was to sunset the the positive discrimination, the affirmative action. So after we have had a certain number of Albanians hired even in managerial positions in the government institutions, then we have corrected the errors of the past when Albanians were, discriminated. That's true to say, that they were discriminated in the public administration hiring, and that this discrimination has been overcome. And from now on, we're going on merit alone. So
exactly, which is the course that has been taken here with affirmative action. Is it's been addressed. Now it's time to dismantle it because this isn't necessary anymore, and it has many abuses, as we've just discussed and as you've just pointed out, from the other side.
After you get a black president, for example, you can do away with this, I imagine.
Well, absolutely. No, affirmative action needs to be completely dismantled at every level, starting at the government level. Now,
absolutely.
I didn't put this in the notes that we discussed beforehand, but I just noticed this today in the various news feeds. So the Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of Albania, Elisa Spiropali, is in Macedonia now, and apparently she is saying, because there's another case before the Constitutional Court in Macedonia to remove Albanian as a second official language in the country. Now, per the so-called Ohrid Framework Agreement, it can be a second language in areas where the minority is at least 20% in any given jurisdictional area, is my understanding. It's not official throughout the entire country. So, so this case is supposed to address that, correct?
Yeah. It's Zaev gave Dewey a completely unconstitutional law making practically the Albanian language second official language. It was immediately, challenged at the level of the Venice Commission, which is like an international constitutional court. We sometimes take these things to, and also at our constitutional court. But I think that our court was postponing acting on this under political pressure from Zaev. So it remains unsettled. It's not being implemented as Zaev imagined. It remains a law in the books. It's clearly unconstitutional for the reasons you mentioned. There is clear limit in the Constitution. So, another thorny issue which I don't think Wilmer and Vlin would like to handle. I mean, they promised to do something on the balancer issue as response to Dewey excessive overhiring of Albanians. Wilmer promised to put an end to this. This is very noticeable. People were reacting to this a lot. Not so much on the issue of the language, because it's not such a big issue, except for symbolic moments when, the parliament speaker gives the oath of office in Albanian first. But it's not enough. It's not something that is so noticeable to the public, and I don't think it's such a big issue at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now I'm going to pivot to this other issue on Bulgaria, but I'm going to do it this way, and I'm looking at two English language Albanian news outlets, and both of them, in one of them it says, quote, during a joint press conference with her Northern Macedonian counterpart, Afrim Gashi, unquote. And the other one, of course, refers to, quote, and her North Macedonian counterpart, unquote. So, a word to the Albanian media that writes about these things. You can at least, if you're asking for these things, you can at least respect the majority of the people of Macedonia who are Macedonian. They're not North Macedonian. They're not Northern Macedonian. They're Macedonian. So if you want to have a little sympathy on your side, then at least address the Macedonians as, well, Macedonians. All right. Now, having got that off my chest, I do notice in X, formerly Twitter, that because I have to scroll through the quote unquote in word Macedonia each day. I'm looking for stuff, and the Bulgarians and the Albanians are just beating up on Macedonians. Now, I say that it's not a huge number, and majority of the people on X, Twitter, from that are ethnic Albanians, ethnic Bulgarians, are of course cowards. They don't use their full name. They have very few followers. They probably live in their parents' basements. They cry themselves to sleep, etc. They're insecure. But they're doing this because of the issues we've just touched on, the Constitutional Court, as well as now we pivot to Bulgaria. And Prime Minister Miskovsky has told the EU he's now in, I think he's in New York for or maybe it's Timcho. Anyway, the government's in New York.
No, it's Gordana Siljanovski's in New York.
Okay.
With Timcho.
Okay, so for the UN General
In the
Assembly.
end, they switched.
Okay.
Mickovsky was supposed to go for the UNGA, but in the end, they switched, and the president went.
Right. Okay. But Miskovsky was in Brussels, I believe, talking to various EU officials, saying, we just can't do this anymore. We're not going to take ultimatums, and as I said in the monologue, we need a stable government. I mean, next month in October, the Bulgarians have a sixth round of parliamentary elections since 2021. I mean, they are. Italy used to have elections every year, it seems like, but now the Bulgarians have supplanted that.
They're really doing it.
Yeah, and of course, then we get into the issue of so this brouhaha, tempest in a teapot. I don't know, maybe it's something more than that. So Alexander Nikolosky, the Minister of Transport and Deputy Prime Minister of Macedonia, what did he say about the Bulgarians? He called them something.
He said that this was an uncivilized action which they did, and the Bulgarians are taking this as he said that they are an uncivilized country. It's not exactly what he said, but they're saying that they're offended.
Everybody's offended.
After, yeah.
Well, and the issue, of course, goes back to when Gordana, the president, was in Bulgaria, and there was a picture released from the Bulgarian government, from the president of Bulgaria, Rumen Radov. What's his name? I forgot it.
Rumen Radov.
Radov, yeah. Okay. So a picture of him and Macedonian President Gordana Siljanovska, and there's no Macedonian flag, just the Bulgarian flag.
Yeah.
That's the incident that Alexander Nikolosky was referring to, and as you said, he referred to it as an uncivilized action or incident. The incident, the action, not the people, but they're making a mountain out of a molehill, a tempest in a teapot, etc., with GERB leader Borisov saying that Nikolosky now has to resign.
Yeah. So, Gordana was trying to do some positive cultural PR, cultural diplomacy. There was the Bulgarian opera visiting Macedonia, so she went there, to give a statement that, we can have cultural exchange no matter what the political differences. And then our opera was performing Nabucco in a return visit in Sofia. She went there. She was invited by Radev for a meeting. Apparently they did strict protocols. So when you're coming at a private visit, it's not mandatory that they put your flag. It can be done, but it can be avoided. I mean, so technically, legally, how shall we say, Radev is in the right here. They were not under obligation to put the flag. It's just good manners if you want to do it. But then our protocol, as our side is explaining the situation, they noticed this and they said, this might be a problem, so kindly please, let's not take pictures in front of the flags. Let's just have pictures in a different setting, maybe at a table, no flags visible, or maybe at the opera. In the meantime, Radev had a plane crash. He's a fighter pilot.
Right.
So he was attending an air, demonstration of some kind. A plane crashed. 2 Bulgarian pilots were killed. So he was much distraught. I'm not sure if he was in Sofia by the time of the crash, meeting Gordana or not. So he had to cancel, obviously, on the performance.
Sure.
But not before. While she was at the presidential palace, he actually invited her. Come, let's take a picture with the flags. In violation of what was agreed, this is what Gordana's protocol says. And she wanted to be a good sport. Now, if the president of a country is inviting you, come here, let's take a picture.
Sure.
It's rude to say no. It's what would it look like. So they took a picture, but the protocols were supposed to then discuss, okay, but you're not publishing this picture. But the Bulgarian president's office shared the pictures. Then somebody in our presidential office also shared the pictures. I can imagine somebody at the lower level who just, okay, let's quickly get the photographs out to the media without much thinking of what's happening in Sofia. Our protocol didn't want to push the point very strongly because they could see that the Bulgarian side is much disturbed, obviously, by what's happened, this tragedy that happened. But then, that could have been the end of it, but then our media got very agitated, and I'm not sure what's behind this, much more than, the actual severity of the situation. They're beginning to report, this is an unseen, unimaginable violation of norms, huge disrespect of our country, even though technically it's possible to, not put the flag in these types of visits. So then Gordana's cabinet is also forced under this media outrage to respond. So they said we'll be investigating the situation with the Bulgarians, how we got this violation of protocol, meaning the idea by Radev to take the picture and then circulate the picture. We had this type of tricks happen in the past, like when Borisov was secretly recording Mitskovsky during a meeting and then shared the video. The Bulgarian side, instead of saying, okay, we are in the right technically, maybe it would have been nice to put the flag, kindly, it won't happen again. Next time we will discuss these things better. Instead, they're being really tough. They say, you don't know diplomacy, you know nothing. We are fully in the right. Our foreign ministry is inviting their ambassador to have a protest note because of the violations of protocol. And because of the latest at the moment, they just picked like the latest insulting statement coming from a Bulgarian official toward Macedonia. At the moment, it was one of the head of their side of the historic commission, Angel Dimitrov, calling the Macedonian politicians dilettantes, made-up country, the usual stuff. Yeah. Like history stealer, something like that. He called them dilettantes, and then there was something else. I'm not really sure at the moment. The Bulgarian ambassador refuses to accept the note, this protest note. They are on their side because I guess they have elections coming up again. Who's even counting anymore? But
this will be number 6 since 2021. So yeah,
who's counting? So all of their politicians are piling on to us. So Radev, like the one who organized this whole thing, so he hopes that he will be the tough guy now, probably trying to help his almost finished party, the БСП, the Socialist Party. Borisov doesn't want to be outdone. He actually has a chance to again win the elections, probably again without the chance of forming a government. So he is piling on the whole situation. Even the ethnic Bulgarian who is the leader of the Turkish party in Bulgaria, Delyan Peevski, is jumping in the whole situation. It's a big mess. And then Alexander goes at an interview, responds that this is unacceptable after all the insults of the past. This labels this violation of protocol as an uncivilized behavior. And now Bulgaria is demanding the resignation of our Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Nikolovsky. They're trying to turn this around, that it's not our president, who was just like an elderly lady trying to give a positive message. She actually supports amending the constitution along what Bulgaria wants at a later date after we have joined the EU or nearly joined the EU. But, really coming for a conciliatory meeting, and the media and their politicians and our protocol and their protocol making the worst possible outcome of this whole situation. And yeah, now we have an issue.
Yes. Well, and by the way, where is our old friend Krasimir Karakatanov in this?
He's not. He hasn't had members of parliament elected in the past
Oh, he's not even in
two
parliament.
elections. Yeah, no.
Oh, well,
he was replaced by another party, the Возрождение party. It happens to them. There was Ataka, then there was Karakachanov's Vimero Benede. Now it's Возрождение. After a while, it's to an extent the same party, but different factions.
Right.
One rises to the top, the others shrivel out. So at the moment, Karakachanov is not that important. There is another guy who's also attacking us, calling it's a loudly pro-Russian party.
Oh.
So Karakachanov's nationalist party, at least his members of European Parliament, they were loudly anti-Russian, as I remember.
Yeah.
And now the current nationalist party they have, it's very loudly pro-Russian. So things change in this field, but there is usually only one of these parties active at any moment.
Well, I'm sure that for this reason and many others, the rest of the European Union is very sorry that they allowed Bulgaria into the EU. But it's called buyer's remorse. But too late, they're stuck with them. So there's elections. I think they're in late October for the next round of parliamentary elections in Bulgaria. Miskovsky has a point. We need a stable government to be able to talk with, and they're literally having parliamentary elections every 2 years, which is just it's not sustainable. You can't talk to a government that's constantly changing, and in the run up to any one of their 6 parliamentary elections over 3 years, they're doing just this. They're piling on. They're distracting the voters' attention from their economic problems, of which there are many, and other problems in Bulgaria, and projecting them on Macedonia. Now, Macedonia has several good ideas, one of which is to, as you mentioned, President Gordana had said, yeah, we can accept the constitutional changes, but they won't take effect until after we join the EU, which will be, checks notes, at least 15 years from now, 10, 15 years from now. But the Bulgarians and perhaps the French as well are being, stubborn, intransigent, and saying, no, it's only this way, which that's, for all the talk of the EU about values and working together and all this other crap that they say, but they actually don't believe in. This is no way to run a multilateral organization the size of the European Union, but it's full of internal contradictions and internal inconsistencies, and ultimately that's why it won't work. Eventually, I just don't know when that's going to be, but anyway, and by the way, has Alexander, has he responded to this demand from Borisov that he stepped down?
He's having additional interviews. He's not, that harshly outspoken as he's portrayed in the Bulgarian media, but he did something else. So there are several layers to all of this. On one side, there is a chance that, as you said, will be blocked by France, by probably the Netherlands now with their new government. There is a strong push from Italy, which is concluding a contract to bring their migrants to Albania, their migrant seekers. Finally, the Italian Prime Minister doing something right-wing as she was promising to do. So in response, they're pushing to have Albania open accession talks. And there is growing talk now that we will be left out because of Bulgaria, but Albania may actually begin talks because, the usual reasons. It has a sea coast, it has an international backer in the face of Italy, and especially the US with all the, close ties. It's over the decades. The CIA director was in the region recently. That's usually a sign that something will be happening, security related or geopolitically related.
Right, yeah.
So this might happen. Alexander came out and said, no, Albania will never join the EU because of the religious issues.
Yes.
So that was another thing that he is now being called out for. More importantly, he he's transportation minister as well. He's deputy prime minister and transportation minister, and he has good connections with Hungary. That is no secret.
Right.
He would visit Budapest frequently over the years. He's favoring, opening our telecom market, and a Hungarian telecom provider is supposed to be the next large cell phone operator in the country, even though the U.S. ambassador sounded not too happy about this, which is also interesting. And his main initiative at the moment is he's saying our biggest strategic move we need to develop would have to be the building a new railroad, just as Hungary and Serbia are building a connection between Belgrade and Budapest. Serbia was courting China, and now the EU for continuing this railroad from Belgrade toward Niš. It's supposed to be like a fast track, like not the 50 kilometers an hour trains we have now. And that's on a good day, but actually, like 150, maybe up to 200 kilometers an hour. And he's saying this is going to be our priority, the north-south corridor to connect to Solun and then Athens. This project was usually mentioned in the context that China owns the ports of Solun and Athens, so she would like to move goods quicker as an alternative to the sea route to Rotterdam. And at the same time, Alexander Nikolovsky says we cannot continue on this by now historic project to build a railroad to Bulgaria. It was hot priority in the early 90s when we were blocked by Greece and by Serbia and by the UN on the Serbian border. And we practically became cut off from any sea access. So Bulgaria was helping us delivering oil by trucks across this mountainous road, like this horrible way of supplying a country. So this was a huge priority then. So many decades passed, we never managed to build this. The fact that Bulgaria is blocking us from joining the EU is not helping. Once in the EU, we would be able to access funding for projects such as this. At the moment, there is a project, but Nikolovsky says it's ridiculously badly done. And there is no project on the Bulgarian side. And so he says, because it's a horrible terrain, we're driving a straight line from Skopje to Sofia, but this goes through a very difficult mountainous terrain. If we go south, we would bypass the mountains. It would be easier terrain, but what's done is done. A portion of this railroad is already built, so we may have to continue. But as it stands now, he keeps saying it would end in the middle of the mountain on our side with no Bulgarian project on the other side. So we would get like a underground, dead-end railroad tunnel. So he says, I have to cancel this project. It's going to cost us €500 million. EU is not pulling its weight on this project. Bulgaria doesn't have an alternative. They have railroad on their side, but it's also old and antiquated. He says it would cost them $1 billion at least to modernize the line on their side. So our side would be useless until they do. So he's canceling the project, and Bulgarian politicians are coming out and saying, no, but wait, we need this line, among other things, to connect Italy to Albania, to Macedonia, to Bulgaria, so that we would have to quickly move American armored units and Marines once, depending on how Ukraine is going. We'll need this as a strategic, we can't go through Serbia, obviously. I'm guessing they can go through Greece or just land in Solun and then, use Greek railroads. But this is one of the arguments that is being used, that we have to build this project for NATO purposes, for the Eastern Front, and at the same time they're accusing Nikolovsky and Vemera in general of being part of a pro-Russian axis. Hungary, Serbia, Macedonia, Greece, I believe, I imagine, because, this is the north-south corridor, while they are Bulgaria is the true Western NATO partner. So this is another of the arguments that is being made. So many layers to this whole story at the moment.
Well, as I said earlier, with regard to the U.S. State Department funding the gay play in Macedonia, it's deja vu all over again. We've been, we've been hearing the same old story over and over again for the past 20, 30 years, whether it's Bulgaria or Greece or Russia this, Russia that, etc. So anyway, okay. Let's see. I gotta wrap up here and get to the office. I touched on the gay play and the monologue. We'll just put a link to it in the notes. It reminds me of 20 years ago when Larry Butler was the U.S. ambassador in Macedonia with the gay billboards. Not just gay, but there were thruples on there. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a thruple, 3 people in a relationship. So it was more than this. But you, of course, then you and I insulted Larry off of Twitter a few years ago. So
yeah, I feel kind of bad about that.
Oh, you do? What? Have you taken leave of your senses?
Just to be able to see what he's up to.
Oh, I know what he's up to.
He's
actually
really weak.
Yeah, I've done some digging. He's basically retired from the State Department, but he's still sucking off the government teat, doing contracting and things like that because he can never have enough money apparently. So, but anyway, we'll put a link to that. What else? Oh, I know. I completely forgot. I usually say this at the beginning. This is episode number 180, Svetlin. 180 times we've done this.
Round number.
Wow. And today is September 23. September 23, the first full day of fall, although it doesn't feel like it here in Arizona. But anyway.
It sure does feel here in Macedonia.
What's the temperature there? What's it going to be this week?
Oh yeah, it's proper autumn weather.
Okay.
Yeah, it's warm around the noon time, but yeah, otherwise proper autumn. It's preparing. Even bought some pumpkins.
Nice.
And, Iver peppers, not to make Iver, just for salads. I buy my Iver.
Oh, I miss that. I miss that smell walking through Skopje, or at least maybe not the center of Skopje nowadays, but the outskirts in Pintia or places like that where people are still making Ivar outdoors. But it'll be when you walk outside and you smell that this week, Svetlin, just remember me that on Friday here it's going to be 40 degrees. So
that's all.
That's Celsius.
That's something.
104 Fahrenheit. Wow. So yeah, welcome to fall, ladies and gentlemen. So.
Exactly.
And on that note, as Jezza, Jeremy Clarkson would say on Top Gear or the Grand Tour, and on that terrible note, it's time to end.
Yeah. Okay, man.
So,
yeah. Great talking
to you.
All right,
good cut. Yep. We'll catch up again soon.
Sure, absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.